Have you ever found yourself paying attention to the wrong thing? March Madness just wrapped up, and I found myself multiple times during the games, right? My wife Sarah and I were watching them, and she'd start cheering. She'd be like, I can't believe that just happened. Did you see that? And I was like, sorry, I was on my phone. Like I was paying attention to the wrong thing. Or I've told you guys this before, I'm not always great with directions. And when I'm driving, I get pretty easily sidetracked in conversations. And so I'll get engaged with the conversation and my 5 points on whatever topic we're talking about. And I miss my exit because I was paying attention to the wrong thing. Today we're talking about a story that happened on the Monday before Jesus' death and resurrection, where we're introduced to two different people, two different groups of people, one of whom misses what Jesus is doing because they're paying attention to the wrong thing. And then another group that gets to see what Jesus is doing because they're willing to let Jesus do what Jesus is going to do. Let me read the story for you. It comes to us in Matthew chapter 21. It starts in verse 14. And the blind and the lame came to him in the temple, and he healed them. But when the chief priests and the scribes saw the wonderful things that he did, and the children crying out in the temple, Hosanna to the Son of David, they were indignant. So you get these two different groups in this story. You get the blind and the lame, who Jesus is healing, and then the kids who are celebrating Jesus, saying, Hosanna, this guy's like something special. We just can't believe that we're getting to witness what he's doing. And then you get the chief priests and the scribes and the Pharisees who are indignant. It literally says at the wonderful things he was doing. You read that story and it's like, well, what is there even to be mad about? You got to understand that in that time, blind and lame people weren't allowed in the temple in the same way that other people were. And so they're seeing these blind and lame people walking in and they're going, well, God wouldn't allow that to happen. That's not the rules, the regulations that we've set up. That's not how this is supposed to work. And so even though Jesus is healing them, even he's doing wonderful things, they've said, man, God wouldn't do that though. They've put God in a box. They've said God wouldn't work that way. And so they're so focused on, the parts of it that they don't like, that they're actually missing the wonderful things that God is doing in front of them. It's kind of like that classic story, classic illustration, right, of the guy who gets caught in a windstorm and a tsunami, and the water's flooding, and so the evacuation team comes to tell him, like, hey, you got to get out of here, it's going to get dangerous. And he responds to him and says, no, don't worry about it, God's going to save me. They're like, okay, well, we can't talk him out, so they leave, and the water comes and it floods up to the second floor, and he's on the second floor of his house, and they send a boat in, and the boat comes in and says, man, we got to get you out of here, it's getting dangerous. And he says, no, don't worry about it, God's going to save me. And so they take off in the boat, and finally the water keeps coming, and he's standing on the roof, because that's the only part of his house not covered in water now, and they send in a helicopter, right? The Coast Guard comes in, and they drop a ladder down, they're like, come on, man, you got to go, like, it's getting bad, it's only going to get worse, you have to get out of here. And he says, don't worry about it, God's going to save me. So the helicopter takes off, and finally the water keeps coming, and the man ends up passing away, and he gets to heaven, and he says, God, why didn't you save me? And God says, I sent an evacuation team, I sent a boat, and I sent the Coast Guard after you. What are you talking about, man? But so often I wonder if we miss the way that God's moving in our life because we've put God in a box. We've said that God has to work in these specific ways, otherwise it's not God. And so we miss the things that he's actually trying to do in our life. We're paying attention to the wrong thing. And the story here, the kind of word of warning, the word of caution is, man, don't miss out on what God's doing in your life because you've tried to make him fit into your box, into your narrative, into your version of the way the story's supposed to go. Let God be God. Let Jesus work in the way that he's going to work. And then you'll get to experience the wonderful things that God has for you and for your life. It just might not look like how we expect it to. So here's the encouragement today. Stop missing what God's doing in your life. Be watching for the way that God is working, even if it's not the way that you expected him to.